Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Duke of Italy, favorite lo-fi concert music YouTuber, because today we are talking a little bit about a concert I just went to. This was last night, and it was one I've been looking forward to since literally January, and I'm pretty excited to talk about it because I got a whole lot to say. Hopefully, not too much, because I don't want this video to drag on extensively long, because I think that would be kind of ridiculous. Sorry if my voice is a little hoarse. That is because I just recorded a single with my band PFMK. I'll probably post a link to it in the description here. It's right now it's kind of metalcore, but it's got a little bit of almost like a spiritual aspect to it, lyrically especially, featuring yours truly on vocals and bass. But the bass part's like not what you're there for. I just wanted to mention that, disclose that as to why I sound like this. It took a long time recording. But I'm beating around the bush here. Let's talk about the show I went to. So this was me seeing basically Shoo. That's why I've been looking forward to it since January. I am not the biggest Shoo fan in the world, and that's something I'll definitely dive into a lot more. But the other two bands there were Dream End, who I've seen one time before, and a band called Shouldies from Philadelphia. Now, I'll start from beginning to end. First band I saw was Dream End. Dream End is a local Savannah-based post-rock band that has been going since early 2000s, as far as I can tell. And their output is kind of awesome. Like, they've got a lot of Americana-based songs that are pretty cool. I own two of their albums on CD, and I have one of their albums on vinyl, one of their earlier ones. They had a post-rock period early on, and they continued it later on. And then they're just a really cool band. Ryan Graveface, head of Graveface Records, is the lead vocalist and guitarist of this band, and he plays these very dream pop-esque guitar lines that turn into these giant things. And I would be ashamed if I didn't mention the drumming. If only I knew the guy's name. This is one of the tightest drummers I've ever seen, playing some of the most intricate or just rhythm lines. Or drum lines in general that I've heard from any band, and it's almost one that doesn't demand it. I think the music is benefited greatly by it, though. I mean, you could technically not need this complex of drumming, but I think it adds a whole lot of energy to it. And this band live, they did about 7 songs, I want to say. Honestly, in the parking lot, I had a beer, went in with my 2 friends, and I stood there and watched. And instead of being on the stage, they were on the middle of the floor, where the drummer was facing the rest of the band. So you get this really intimate feeling here of this dude singing, guy on keys, girl on bass, and also singing for some songs, and the guy on drums. Very intimate setup with really cool lighting, and also a guy with a camcorder that was projecting onto the wall with like food coloring and like vegetable oil and apparently dish soap being dripped over like the projector, as well as some intricate like designs going through the projector while the live footage was being projected at the same time, which was visually very striking, very interesting. It really amplified the sort of intimate feeling that was going on there. That being said, the first time I saw this band is no different from the second time in terms of loudness. This is a loud band, a super loud rock band, as post-rock tends to be pretty loud in person. This drummer was like right next to my face as he was on the floor. So when he hit the snare with a lot of flams, he'd do just like, which is like when you hit it like twice, like in a very short succession, with both hands. I'm not a drummer, so if I'm wrong, please politely just correct me in the comments. Don't flame me here. I'm not a drummer, but that thing just was crushing my ears. But I have no complaints because everything this band did was amazing. The combination of the visuals and the instrumentals, and the rather twee sounding vocals. Neither vocalist sounded super trained. Not that that's really much of a complaint, because it was very effective for the music that was portrayed here. They both had very clear voices. Neither were shrill. Both were good singers, if not in like an operatic traditional sense. But like they were good rock singers. The lead vocalist, he actually, I've seen Dream End actually 3 times, but one time they were covering a bunch of Smashing Pumpkins songs. He does a good Billy Corgan impression. So I doubt he'll hear this, but if he does, you do an excellent Billy Corgan impression, even better than modern Billy Corgan does of old Billy Corgan. But that was simply enough. Dream End is a fantastic band to see live, and this is going to be the most shocking thing I say about this whole concert. They were my favorite band of the night. I know I could see Dream End probably at some other point. I know they don't play that much, but every time they play, it is a burning performance. It is one that you will be stunned at, left mouth gaping. People were headbanging in a very primal, very reactionary sort of way, like not like trying to get into it or angry, but it was just such an engaging sound, such an engaging performance. You couldn't help but just surge to it, and it sounded amazing. Now, that was Dream End, and I can do nothing but recommend them. They sound like their records, if not a lot better in person. Because I mean, the records could be 10 to 15-ish years old at this point. Maybe they don't have that modern shine, but live, they filled the room. It very clearly felt like the room was meant to hold their sound. This show, I should mention, also was done at the Lodge of Sorrows. It's one I've been to, 10 times I've seen shows here. I saw Primitive Man at this one, which was insane. I've been here many times. In fact, I still have, there's a little skull. Yep, right there. I might actually use that for a thumbnail, but that's how you know I was there. Dream End was fantastic. Second band that showed up was Shouldies. Shouldies, I will admit, I missed a couple songs of theirs going to the bathroom, and that is one flaw about Lodge of Sorrows, is like you just gotta go back and come back. Maybe go get a drink, chug it, come back, because they go back and forth. But it's not like a one giant building. It's like there's a building with a big parking lot that you got to do to go use the bathroom or grab your drinks or whatever. So you can't really tell what's going on. It's a little hard to tell between the recorded music that they're playing and the live music's playing. But Shouldies is a two-person LGBT sort of dark wave post-industrial act. I'm not very familiar with dark wave as a genre. It's one that I just haven't crossed that much into. But it was kind of, some people said it was synthwave. I thought it was like post-industrial plus dark wave. There was one song that was straight just swamped with 808. And there were two people up there, I believe a girl and a guy. And the guy was on vocals, and he sounded straight from the 1980s. Had a very monotone sort of delivery that was really like hypnotic. That was really cool. And the girl was playing these really cool beats up there, like these really intricate synth layers that felt kind of simplistic, and they'd be very repetitive, but it was in a way that you could really groove to. It was music to do drugs to, basically. Not that I'm a fiend myself, but what was really odd to me is this is a very groovy, hypnotic act, and I was dancing to them, but nobody else was. I could tell people were not vibing with them as much as I was, which I thought was a real shame. Even my roommate, who went to the show as well, he said he didn't like them that much, and I just didn't understand why, because I really could get down with them. I couldn't hear the lyrics perfectly. That's just the way my ears are. It's that way with recorded music as well. It's just a problem I have. I don't know if it's because of excessive wear and tear I've done on my ears. Wear earplugs, kids. But I thought they were great. Very hypnotic. The songs were very similar throughout. Some were groovier than others. Some were a bit more hypnotic. One song literally felt just like 808 bass that just swamped the room. I literally felt it like in my chest vibrating. And I was like, this doesn't sound as loud as stuff I've heard, but it feels very loud, which is kind of bizarre to me. So they were great as well. I didn't like them as a Dream End, but they were awesome. And the third group, which I'm glad I've had time to consider, because I had a lot of feelings about last night. Third group was Shushu. Shushu, if you don't know, experimental synth, punk, minimal synth, post-industrial, newly death industrial band from California, has been going since at least 2001, plus like some earlier projects like 10 in the Swear Jar. Shushu has history, and they've been under the Greyface label for a couple releases, such as their Shushu Covers Nina CD, which I own a copy of. I also own 2 Shushu vinyls as of yesterday. I bought a copy of A Promise, and I've owned Knife Play for a bit now, and that was the only way I've heard Knife Play is on vinyl. Shushu, any compliments I say right now are almost nothing new. Shushu is touring their current album, Ignore Grief, that they dropped, I want to say like a month ago. So I heard this album just 2 nights ago. Ignore Grief is this monstrous sounding death industrial album, which Shushu does not normally do. They're always creepy. They're always unnerving. They're usually very sad. But this time, they pushed it full throttle and went straight for the neck with death industrial elements, really noisy stuff. A song about a talking to a tarantula to escape abuse with these industrial sounding like crawling effects that'll make you squirm in your seat. Like you're gonna squirm around. It's gross. But this whole album is been getting a lot of criticism, but I loved it. Genuinely think it's in like top 6 Shoo albums maybe. But they have a lot of albums. Like they have so many. Like A Promise, La Forêt, Air Force, Girl with Basket of Fruit. Those are maybe like their top 4 for me personally. And they've got also like Twin Peaks, which would maybe be number 5. That, or maybe Ignore Grief might be that 5th one or 6th one. I'd have to listen to them all again. But new album's great, and they're touring that new one. And they played 3 songs off that one. In fact, they opened the whole show with Perump. And Shoo Shoo's a 3-person band. Angela, Jamie, and the new guy, who people know from a brief stint in Devo, in the 80s, which I think is kind of hilarious how this guy's here. Now, first of all, if you've heard a lot of Shoo Shoo in the past, you would think, well, I don't hear a lot of drums. What's this drummer doing here? Yeah, he was drumming for pretty much the whole show, bar like 2 songs. And Shoo Shoo doesn't have a lot of drum sounds. And I have a lot I could just say about the drumming. Now, his drumming was great. It was a real drum kit, and it kind of clashed with what I know Shoo Shoo to sound like. When I came to the show for Shoo Shoo, and I bought those tickets months ago, I knew A Promise better than any other Shoo Shoo record. And that's kind of what I came for. And they did 2 songs from A Promise. They did Apostat Commander and Ian Curtis Wishlist. They could have done any song other than those 2. In addition, I mean, those are probably the 2 most important tracks there. But Sad Pony Gorilla Girl is absolutely amazing. Pink City would have left people squirming out there. Sad Reduxographer, I would have been crying, probably. But going to see Shoo Shoo, I expected horrific vibes, just absolutely disgusting vibes, and industrial stuff. I expected a lot of synths and a lot of really heavy stuff. And what I was really surprised to hear was a lot more guitar, so much more guitar than you'd think. And I also heard some keys, nothing modular up there as far as I could tell. I should say, standing concert, everyone's standing, and I could barely see Jamie. I could not see the drummer. I could see Angela better than anyone else. She was wearing a wonderful dress up there. I should mention, she had this like bright red dress, very fancy. Really brought some stuff to it. And I will say, so I mentioned Dream End having the projector. Shouldies used that projector as well, but they had like the vegetable oil covering it, so it had more of a grimy look to it, which kind of fit that like dark industrial New York type of vibe they went for. Shoo Shoo, I've seen some concert footage of them in the past, and I've compared their past set list to this one. They've been apparently using the same set list since about a week ago. Probably earlier in this year as well, because I saw it pretty much kept up. I didn't recognize every song, but it kept up seemingly the same pace. And they didn't use a projector at all, which I didn't expect them to, but their lighting setup. They just used the lights from the venue, small venue, and it was these lights that had, imagine this light that's on my face as we speak, but covering the whole stage. So you got all 3 of them brightly lit, perfectly lit, nothing vibey at all. And I've seen in previous concert footage of them being lit in like a moody red or a moody purple. And what we got here was this really plain lighting that I've even seen local bands be on this stage with better lighting. And I heard someone once tell me, actually just last night, I took Bridget to the show and I was complaining about this. And Bridget was like, they're not there for the lighting. You should be there for the music. And I'm like, well, it's a whole experience. And the lights just didn't set a vibe. They felt clashing, which that and a few other functions of the show as a whole made it feel a lot more like a rehearsal than a live performance. But there were probably about 4 or 5 songs that brought it above that level, which I'm going to talk about. Now Shoo Shoo, I'd be lying if I said they weren't one of the best bands ever. I genuinely think they're one of the best bands ever. Those 5 albums I mentioned, if any of those 5 were in any other person's discography, that band would be a classic band, heralded by many on Rate Your Music, Mew, Reddit, YouTube. Fantano himself would laud over them. Like, people would be screaming just to get their vinyl, because Shoo Shoo is that good of a band. They have a catalog that any other band would do anything for. And it's because of their songwriting. It's because of their intricate synth work and the really interesting synth work, I should say. So I had extremely high expectations. And I'll say that because I was a little disappointed with the show as a whole because my expectations were so absurdly high. And this lighting was so conflicting of a vibe. And I feel like part of it was to kind of take away the celebrity image of Shushu because they are a mucore band. They are a band that is lauded by Pitchfork and Rate Your Music and all these people because they're just that good. And this plain lighting really took away from that. And on one hand, I get that. But on the other hand, the vibes were just cut down a kind of a significant margin. Now, band had about like 11 or 12 songs as far as I can remember. They did 2 covers. One I never heard of in my life, and one of them was Ceremony by New Order. I didn't recognize it, but I was really confused why they were doing another new wave sounding song live. They were doing a few songs that sounded very new wave-esque. They did a song off of Forget. They did a song off of Air Force, and they did a song off of Women as Lovers. And all 3 of these sounded very new wave-esque, and to that it felt really bizarre to me, and I didn't get it. And this was due to the synths not having their presence like they did on the records. And I will give a caveat and say those first 3 or 4 albums have, or first 3 definitely, have a lo-fi element to them, and they have a certain amount of post-production added that definitely makes it so the synths have more of a presence. In live, they had a couple songs that the synths did have this presence, and I'll get into those in a second, but I have so much to talk about here. I couldn't possibly be skipping that much because it's just so much. New wave is the one thing, is they had all these poppier Shushu cuts, which, granted, I wasn't there to see. Sounded very new wave. They also did, what's the song? They did a song off of Oh No. They did 2 songs off of Oh No. They did Bottle of Rum, which I didn't really recognize, and they did Rumpus Room, which Serena, who was on my top 10 albums of the year list, that's her favorite Shushu song, and she was most excited to see that one. And the bass line came through very clearly. But the thing is, I mean, I don't love Oh No as an album because it sounds a lot like a few other Shushu albums that have less of an appealing sound to me, just the poppier sound. And I know the thing about Shushu is that they're kind of deconstructing pop music. They're deconstructing rock music, and indie rock especially. They take indie rock and dash it along the rocks because they're that innovative. But hearing Rumpus Room just be reduced to an indie rock song was a little bit disappointing to me. People were jumping to it though. People were super energetic to it. And that being said, since this is the Ignore Grief tour, they did 3 Ignore Grief songs. Those songs were highly unsettling as they are on the album. But because those songs are so electronically dense on the record, there wasn't a single way they were going to do this live, at least as they did it on the record. But what we did get was a very interesting sounding version live. I think these songs were worth it live. They were really cool, if a bit reduced, more guitar work, more normal drums instead of the heavy death industrial clangs that we get on the record, as you can hear it right now. But I thought those were worth my time. As well as that, we got 2 songs off of Fabulous Muscles. They did the song Fabulous Muscles, and they ended the whole show with I Love the Valley O. The thing is, so that song and a couple others they did don't originally have drums on them, and yet they added drums, which turned them into indie rock songs. The intimacy was taken from it a lot. It rubbed me the wrong way. I was still there trying to have a good time, and I did have a good time. The thing is, I don't really want to have a good time to Shushu. I want it to get into my head. And that is one thing I liked about the song Fabulous Muscles. I think, if I remember correctly, there were drums on it, but it still had a level of intimacy. It still felt very deeply personal, and you could tell from the lyrics that this thing was stupidly intimate, which was crazy about it. And that leads me to my absolute favorite moments of the night, which were the 2 songs off of A Promise, which I did a classic review, which I'll probably link in the description, in December, because it's an absolute classic album. If you call it a 10 out of 10, I wouldn't really argue with you about that. I don't find it a 10 out of 10 myself, but I find it pretty darn close. It is certainly just a force of an album. And that thing, to me, I think it's sadder than Death Con. It's not as grand as Death Con. And the lack of grandiosity is a thing that's a problem with a lot of Shushu records, but I don't think that was the case here. So they did Apostat Commander probably 5 songs in. And at first I didn't recognize it because it came after some new wave sounding stuff. And then you heard the dense kick drum and he goes up and he starts singing softly. And I was like, okay, this is Apostat Commander. And the vibes shifted so severely because everyone knew what was going to happen. And I was so happy with the song because right when the chorus hit, Jamie hit like a drum pad button or some kind of synth button, and more synths came through. And Angela was already playing synths that were pretty heavy. And this was one of the most dense synth moments of the show. And you got just pretty close to the sound on the record. And the drumming was very tight. It did feel a little bit new wavy, but it felt like a very deeply sad new wave sort of version. I think it worked really well. Apostat Commander, it was done really well because it's just such a well-written song. It's such an emotionally gripping song. It's one that you can't help but just be locked into. And I'm going to mention the audience briefly for here. A lot of times during the show, the audience was standing still. And I kind of expected that for the whole show. But during Rumpus Room and during Apostat Commander and I Love the Valley O, they were jumping up and down, like almost moshing. There were probably like 10 people in the audience that were like pushing back and forth, which I thought was pretty hilarious. And that was just awesome. And so I mentioned Rumpus Room a bit earlier. Probably my favorite moment of the show. Rumpus Room ends. You hear the most dense synths of the whole night because they go into Ian Curtis' Wishlist. One of my favorite Shushu songs, absolutely. It's like a half-spoken, half-sung piece, and it is the only one you could actually at all claim was better than the version on the record of the night because Jamie was screaming more. That is a song about deep insecurities and feeling you'll never be loved. And to have, if you guys have ever heard of Promise, putting insecurity on the same topic of a family member's death and making it as effective and as deeply saddening takes a monumental amount of songwriting skill and just brain power and soul and all these things that are unquantifiable, basically, except due to your own feeling about them. Because this felt like absolutely devastated. It felt absolutely like a wasteland. It was just so deep and awful sounding in the best way possible. And the screaming, the extra screaming really went toe-to-toe with the screaming that was on the record, which I thought was very impressive with how deeply emotional it sounded. And then they called for one more song of the night, and then they did Grow Up Basket of Fruit, which I could tie up all my criticisms about the show with Grow Up Basket of Fruit. I straight up thought they weren't even doing that song. It sounded like I heard them say it came out as a joke, and I thought it was a different song. And granted, I've only heard Grow Up Basket of Fruit so many times, but they kind of turn it into a Swans track minus the powerful guitar. Because of the drumming. And the drumming was really cool, but it was all played on the snare. And obviously, if you guys have heard the album, you know there's a lot of Haitian drumming influence. And you probably wouldn't know that from listening to the album. You probably look on Rate Your Music and see that just as I did. You know the drumming would sound like very tribal and very dense and very scary. But instead, we got this like manic sounding drum, which was interesting. But I was trying to like vibe with the track, and I was just like, this is so against what was on the record. And it just kind of sucked my soul out a little bit. And like I was enjoying it. I was like, this is pretty crazy. But like I didn't even hear him say Girl with Basket of Fruit until the end of the song. Granted, again, I'm bad at hearing lyrics. Bridget and Serena heard him say Girl with Basket of Fruit many more times, but I couldn't hear it at the beginning. And I thought it was Girl with Basket of Fruit, and I was like, of course it's Girl with Basket of Fruit. And then it changed from what I knew, and I was like, oh, this is confusing. But kind of a decent song. I was very disappointed with that being my experience with that song because it sounded nothing like the record. And I'm just gonna say right now, when I criticized King Crimson that long time ago, a lot of people were like, "You're not the artist. You don't know." You're right. I'm not the artist, and I don't know what is best for the song. But I know as an audience member what will affect my experience as a listener and as a viewer, which is the two parts of being an audience member. If there's a smell there, that's probably another audience member. That's a totally different thing, which I'm not even going to let affect me. In fact, the visuals is partially affected by the fact there was some 6'2" dude right in front of me who moved midway through the show. Bit of a tough thing for me. That's okay. But I do want to mention there is a concept, the death of the artist concept. Criticism is valid. I know. I'm not the artist. I wouldn't actually go to the show if I didn't believe in this band. And I'm going to say something very positive about this after this, just to alleviate your guys' anger at me if you have that. But I'm just giving my honest thoughts here, and I'm really not trying to dilute it any further. But that's just me saying that song and a couple others really didn't fit the vibe that was appealing to me at the time. It kind of broke up the vibe of the show. And that is one thing I will say. If you are a diehard Shoo fan, if you know every song of theirs, you will absolutely love the show. In fact, I could see you going to a bunch of their shows. Me, I am a fan of half of their discography. I like all of the albums. I think Shoo has 2 bad songs, pretty much. I won't even tell you which ones because I don't really care. But I think Shoo is very, very consistent, and I love all their music. But the fact that they changed what I was looking for, and it's interestingly reductive because you turn from these crazy cool genres, and Shoo is a band that criticizes indie rock, and to hear them turn into indie rock once again was almost heartbreaking. And again, they are the artists. I'm not the one coming up with a vision. I think there was a lot here to be appreciated, but hearing it revert back to that with Jamie Stewart, half of it being like dream pop sounding guitar, I was like, that's pulling me out of it a little bit. And one thing I will say about the show that was undeniably fantastic, Jamie Stewart's performance as a vocalist was amazing. Better than the records, actually, because it felt so intimate and genuine. And I'm sure it's because it was of him seeing the audience, maybe. It looked like his eyes were closed for part of it, but I think it's just how his face looks. He sounded fantastic up there. Literally, like, if you don't like his singing on the records, you'll like it here because he sounded almost like classically trained. He almost sounded operatic at points, which I thought was fantastic. He sounded very, very in the game. He sounded totally ready and totally set, and it was just perfect. The songwriting rang through on almost all of this stuff. The dronier cuts worked perfectly because the synths were really given their room to breathe. And drumming, it worked where it worked. I didn't like it as much on songs that weren't supposed to have drumming. That being said, so they did Girl with Basket of Fruit. Show ends, they go off stage, come back on stage, do I Love the Valley O, which had a lot more drumming, a lot more of an energetic piece of music, which it was kind of fun, but it felt weird having like a sing-along moment. But no one was singing along to Apple Commander, which I was singing along to, because that's probably my favorite Shoo song. So those are my thoughts about seeing Shoo live. Granted, some of the sonic effect might have been dulled a little bit because the Lodge of Sorrows might not have been ready to support such a sound. I don't want to think that because that's like my favorite concert venue that is local. It is definitely the best one that's local, actually, because you'll see the best acts there. Like I've been mentioning all these bands that I've been seeing there. But there were moments. It was a show of great moments, not great consistency. And I won't lie, Apostat Commander was like best part of the night. Ian Curtis Wishlist was the best part of the night. I'd probably put it a bit over Apostat Commander just in terms of live experience because I thought live it had so much weight because it was so freaking loud. I will say Shoo was very loud, but unfortunately there were a couple points where people were talking during both Shouldies and Shoo that really hurt the experience for me. And I recommend you see Shoo, but I listened to all their albums one more time like a couple weeks before I saw them. And most of those albums I never heard before in my life. And that was not enough time to give experiencing all their music because they have 100 songs or something like that. They have an absurd amount of songs. And it's really worth it to check out all their music. It's all good. Really take your time. I should have been listening to them since January, but I knew the Promise tracks pretty well because those are just the best. Shoo's a great band. Buy their records, buy their CDs. Tell me what you guys thought about the show if you saw them or if you will see them. Interestingly enough, what would the vibe of the audience was even meant to be like? I couldn't tell. I know there's not like a sign that says here's what you do, but like there are occasional genres of music where you're like, here's what you do at the show. Because like if you go see like a metalcore show, sometimes they'll say like, hey, if someone falls, pick them up. That's like etiquette for that. That's very well spoken of. I wasn't quite sure what this was about. So overall, a very confusing show, but at the same time, gratifying, very satisfying. I'm glad I had a day to like digest it all as I saw it just last night. But I recommend the show to any fan of Shushu because, I mean, the music's great and the performances are great, and there's a lot there to be appreciated. But I've been speaking long enough about my grievances and things to be appreciated about the band Shushu's live performance at the Lodge of Sorrows on April 15th, as well as Shouldies and Dream End. I recommend all these bands again and again and again. And that's about it. Hope you guys enjoyed. In the description below, you'll see my review of A Promise. You'll see a link to my new band's single, or my band's new single, rather. You will find my social medias, my Discord page. Please consider following. Please consider joining. You support Shushu's music, support Dream End, support Shouldies. I didn't know Shouldies before this show, but I'm going to support them now. And that's like and subscribe. That's about it. Hope you guys have a good one. Have a good day. Bye.